Hi Ashwini, awesome to have you on our podcast. API security, the good, the bad, the ugly. We would love to know more about you yourself. Your experience of being in AppSec all over the years. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Ankita, for inviting me to this. I'm really excited for this conversation with you. Yeah, so I've been in AppSec for almost about 7 years now, and I've seen the transition, right, go through uh, web AppSec, like focus on like web application, and then now slowly moving towards API. So since I think this transition is just like it's gonna be more uh, what do you call it? It's going to be more like evolving just because how everything these days has become more API centric, right? API security has become like really a crucial part of any application security tool, including mine, right? So there are certain things that I do as an AppSec engineer when it comes to API security. So like currently I'm working on strategizing ways to improve the API security posture of our company by like collaborating with internal teams, my peers, on creating a solution that can provide us with a comprehensive, say, API inventory. Like an API inventory is a key to get visibility into what you have, what you need to secure, right? That's the most important thing. And then along with that, I'm also working with my engineers. I see myself talking to product teams, reviewing their feature requests, reviewing their merge requests, reviewing their codes, just to make sure that like whatever new APIs that we are developing or any third party integrations we are doing into our products, we are doing it in a secure way, and we are making sure that we're building the right product in a secure product.
Awesome, Ashwini.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting, right? Like especially the part that you've mentioned, where you are reviewing the code of the developers, you're reviewing the APIs before they're put into production. So that brings me to my second question, which is, in our experience we meet a lot of security teams, and we have been hearing like some security teams want to solve for API security pre-production, like before APIs are deployed. Some security teams want it post, and some do both actually. In your experience, what is your preferred way of securing APIs, and why is that a preferred way?
Yeah, like this is an interesting question, and I think it has there are both. I think both the sides are you can do it anywhere, right? Pre-production or post-production, right? Like once something is deployed, like there is no single bullet when it comes to security or application security in this particular case, right? Like it really, I think in my opinion, it really comes down to the organizational maturity level, like where the team is, how much resources you have uh, to spend on those various API security methodologies, right? And I think I see both the sides of it. So, but yeah, I think when it comes to when we talk about pre-production, there is definitely an added benefit of building something secure uh, inherently. Like we are not shipping out something that might have bugs, that might have vulnerabilities, that now we have to go back, take it to the engineering teams and make sure that we are closing those gaps. And in some cases it might be difficult, right? Because just how the product is built or how the integrations have been made, because it's not just one team that is working on it. It's not just one service. There are multiple APIs, multiple services utilizing those endpoints, and it can get tricky and messy real fast, right? So I think for those reasons, having a pre-production security methodology where you're using automated security testing tools, like you're trying to maybe uh, add those security test cases within the CI/CD, and then detect those misconfiguration or security vulnerabilities early in the development process. I think that's crucial, and that's the right way to do it. But obviously, not everything is pink balloons and rainbows, right? So, given the resources or given the priorities, sometimes it's difficult to be able to do that. So I think post production, there is definitely still value to do it post production. It kind of helps you prioritize the right issues, right vulnerabilities, right? Because that's the production environment. That's where uh, the attackers or bad people are trying to exploit your APIs or uh, exploit the vulnerabilities in your endpoints, right? So you can really prioritize what needs to be fixed, what hole needs to be closed, and then uh, work with your engineering teams or right folks to close those.
Awesome. So, Ashwini, what I'm hearing from you, and which is actually the right point, is there's no one way which can completely secure your APIs. There's
Yeah,
a value in doing post production. There's value in doing pre production. But I guess your preferred way, or maybe I'll say priority, is to do it pre production, which makes sense. And that leads me to the next question, which I think you a little bit touched upon also.
yeah,
That you do a lot of code reviews. Before
yeah.
APIs are deployed, you read through the APIs, find vulnerabilities. Now I wanted to ask, has there been a time when you've blocked a release because of a critical vulnerability that you've found, and maybe you can talk about one of those examples.
Yes, yeah, sure. I can talk about it briefly, not trying not to go into too much details, right? So, yeah, I think so. One of the major, I'm gonna like give a bit of pretext to it, right? I think for any API or for any API, the most important or most crucial thing is having, or one of the most crucial things is having proper authentication and authorization, right? So if that's the core of it. If we are missing authentication or having proper authorization controls, access controls, then things are going to get ugly, right? So on the same note, on the same point, I think I was reviewing one API. I was reviewing one MR, and then I realized that okay, the team is trying to add a new endpoint, which is like talking to other internal services, right? And then upon the code review, and then talking to my team, I quickly figured out that okay, hey, like something, the endpoint is not properly uh, authorizing. Like there are no authorization controls or access controls that are stopping attackers or someone else from calling for resources that they should not have access to. So more like say IDOR or Bola type attacks, right? So that's something, one of the scariest things that I've identified doing the manual code reviews pre-prod, and making sure that all hands were on deck to fix those, work on those, and shipping the right product.
Wow, that must have been something. No, but Ashwini, that's something that we hear from most security teams, like IDOR and BOLA.
Yeah.
Vulnerabilities are the most common and most difficult to identify pre-prod. So yeah, it takes a little bit of manual code review, it takes a little bit of testing, and there are multiple ways to find those vulnerabilities pre-prod. I wanted to know from you. So we don't live in the ideal world today, but let's say we did. We are living in this ideal world, and
Yeah.
where we have the perfect way to secure APIs pre-prod. Now, for you, what is that ideal way to secure pre-prod? Is it code review, testing, or some other way?
Yeah, so I think my ideal way is the hard way. So it's like yeah, it's my ideal way is the hard way, right? So but like, because my philosophy or my methodology or thinking is that you should be doing the right thing no matter how difficult or how hard it is, right? So in a perfect world, I see uh, an API security. I see API security to be handled with, uh, like I mentioned before, proper code reviews, conducting like a thorough analysis of uh, the entire architecture or the entire ecosystem of what we are trying to build or what the team is trying to build, right? Understanding, like understanding hey, what is being built, why it's being built, who's going to be the customer, what value that product is trying to bring, so that I can better understand and prioritize what needs to really be secure, right? Because if I don't know what I'm securing, then I'm bound to miss things and I'm bound to make mistakes, right? So for me, having that in-depth analysis is the most important or the key things of going about API security. Along with that, I think having those. I've already talked about secure code reviews, but then also uh, creating and enforcing guidelines around API security, right? Because uh, one thing is, yes, I, as a security engineer, can identify something, take it to my engineering team, make sure that they are fixing things, but this is going to be a repetitive process, right? Unless we are solving this problem from ground up, which is knowledge sharing, which is making sure that we are publishing resources around API best practices. We have standards around API security, or standards around a secure API. We are making sure all the teams are using the same approach when it comes to building an API. Because I've seen a lot of times, like team A might be thinking about or taking a different approach for an API. Team B might be taking a completely different approach. So it really is difficult to, again, like secure something or think about or making a plan on around API security when we don't have a clear standard for the teams to follow. So those are the couple of things that I think are more manual, but definitely I think I personally, like, right now you go, I think you go out. If I talk to five people, or if I meet like five vendor, just like this year's RSA, I went to RSA, one out of five vendor I was talking to, they were talking about API security tool, right? How they are building an API security tool that can provide blah blah blah. I think in an ideal world, having a tool like that is definitely important and definitely something that is going to revolutionize the world of API security or application security in general. So yeah. So yes, my way involves resources, involves budget, involves cost, involves like time, everything. So that's, I think, which is the hardest thing to get today.
Yeah. No, Ashwini, that's right. Like, this is your ideal way, right? And
Yep.
it's very hard because there's no there's no automated product out there today, so you have to do it manually, you have to do it in a process oriented way. And we're
Yeah.
talking about engineering teams which are, very fast developing product or building a feature. They don't have time to go over all of these security practices, but at the same time your team is trying very hard to make sure that they understand these security practices and put it in their code or APIs that they are building. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a very hard process. Um, Given that we can only do so much, right? And we live in a practical world.
Yeah.
What, according to you, would be a practical way that not just you, but maybe other companies, your peers, are following today in their sort of companies?
Yeah, for sure, right? So, yeah, I've been talking to a lot of my peers, right? And like my friends, like working in different companies in the same space, trying to go about API security. I'm not gonna comment about the right way or the wrong way, but what I'm seeing a trend that's going on right now is most of the companies are relying on traditional security toolings like they have an existing static analysis tool or a dynamic analysis tool that they're trying to make it work to solve this API security problem that we are, or API security, yeah, the trying to solve this thing, API security, right? So I I definitely have my opinions or like my comments on that topic, since I feel like those traditional tools were not really built to tackle something that the teams are trying to do. They just because how the logic and the nature of the tool, it's very easy to miss some of the things that an ideal security tool should be looking for when reviewing an API's uh, documentation or an API spec, right? So this is something that I'm looking at most of the companies who are not trying to invest in a new tool or trying to spend resources because of whatever reasons, right? But then also, I think a lot of companies are today leveraging programs like bug bounty programs or internal or external pen testing, right? Where again, this is I think, in my opinion, is a good approach, right? So if you do not have if you don't have bandwidth or resources to conduct or perform manual code reviews, then I think taking a more an approach where someone is trying to simulate a real world or real world attack scenario, real world attack methodology to that I identify potential flaws or misconfiguration or vulnerabilities in your endpoints. I think that is definitely you should be doing if not threat modeling or code reviews and those kind of activities. But
Got
yeah,
it.
this is the kind of the trend that I'm seeing out there today.
Got it. So, Ashwini, what I'm hearing from you is that you're not very impressed with the way, like right today, companies are adopting API security. And if it were to you, let's say you are given this opportunity to build an API security product which is solving for
Mm.
security pre-prod. What is that future like? What will you envision to build? I would love to know from you, like, given if you have all the resources.
Yeah, sure. I think securing APIs or approaching API security pre-prod uh, requires, I would say, three main or key components, right? Uh, one is communication, right? So like it's an orthodox, it's not like really a tool related thing, but communication is the most important thing here, right? We need to have, sometimes I think I'm seeing people are jumping right into hey, yeah, we have to secure our APIs. Let's go and secure our APIs. I don't think that's the right approach. We need to uh, have the right strategy and roadmap on what we are trying to do. We need to have those conversations and communications with the right stakeholders, right folks. We need to have those buy-ins, and then we should go about, okay, let's now secure our APIs, because securing APIs pre-production is not possible unless you have those buy-ins and collaborations and support from engineering teams, right? Because those are the people who are actually building code or building those APIs, and I need to be on the same page with them to make sure uh, things are working smoothly. But yeah, that being said, I think from a uh, tooling or methodology wise, we another piece of it is having a way to build an API inventory, right? Having and when I say building an API inventory, again, it comes down to my first point, right? Before I dive into uh, uh, before I dive into pre-production, or sorry, before I dive into securing APIs and whatnot, I need to be able to know what all APIs I have. Uh, what all APIs I have, what the teams are working on, what the teams are building, and then take a more systematic way or systematic approach to deal with it. The third piece of it is actual implementation, right? What do I do about it? And I think this is going to be solved by using an API security tool that can create high quality, and a high quality is the key here, right? Because I think there are a lot of fuzzing tools out there that are trying to do it, but they are not really close to providing a good solution. So definitely, like having a high quality auto generated API security test that run into your CI/CD environments and simulate a real world scenario and attack techniques that detect more complex attacks like Pola or IDOR, like I mentioned before. Things like, okay, missing authentication, injection issues, those kind of things, or even giving uh, uh, yeah, giving visibility into like security misconfiguration or API misconfiguration issues that can lead to a major exploit or a vulnerability.
Got it. Awesome. I think you've touched upon really good points. I want to focus on the developer part here. So you've talked a lot about communication, that no tool can really solve it. It's communicating with the developers, and it's really hard, and it involves a lot of back and forth, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you this: like, how do you convince developers to adopt best practices around API security? How's that journey like?
Yeah, it's been a difficult journey, but I think uh, it is the most important part of it. So I think so. How the approach that I take is uh, having knowledge shares, right? Having knowledge shares, providing comprehensive trainings and resources around API security threats, having publishing secure coding practices. Along with that, like having a clear and concise documentation, right? That outlines, okay, uh, how, how to build a secure API from scratch. So if I'm an engineer and I am trying to build an API, and I don't know anything about securing APIs, or I don't know what really a secure API means. So I try to have those resources available for my team or for my engineering team. That this is like, obviously nothing is perfect, right? You cannot just follow, or like there's no perfect checklist that you just like take 10 things and you're secure, but at least as close as possible to provide the uh, best practices or items that like to look for when building an API to make sure we're building a secure product. Along with that, providing constructive feedback, right? So instead of like this is something that I learned very early on in my career, like where if I'm identifying a bug or an issue, not even related to API, right? Any bug or any issue that I'm identifying, there has to be there's a good way, good and bad way to communicate that uh, to your engineering teams, right? We should always be providing constructive feedback. And this is the approach that I take here, right? Just provide a constructive feedback about, hey, like, something that you might have discovered while performing those reviews or while having those conversations with the product or engineering teams, and making sure that they really understand the core of it. It's not just like, hey, this is bad, you need to fix it, but also making them understand why this is bad, how you can make sure this does not get introduced in the future, right? So I think in short, it's more about taking effort to providing those trainings, knowledge shares, documentations, and those kind of things.
Okay, awesome. Ashwini, I think what you're doing is probably one tenth of the companies I have seen doing. So awesome job at communicating with the developers, providing them those knowledge shares that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that brings me to my next question is like you talked about communication with the developers. Now, once let's say you have identified a vulnerability, what is the typical process of remediation like? Is it that you create a Jira ticket or put it in your project management tool or talk to them on Slack or comment on the PR?
Yeah.
Like how does that work?
Yeah, it really depends on the vulnerability, right? So I think I would say the first thing would be prioritization, right? So prioritization is the key here. So we need to identify, or in this case, I try to identify, hey, what really is the vulnerability? What really is the issue about? What's the risk here? What's the impact? And that really sort of helps me drive the urgency of the remediation. If it's something that's gonna impact customers and members of our product, then all hands on deck. I'm not waiting uh, on the traditional remediation flow to kick in, sending tickets out, creating Jira tickets, sending it out, those kind of things, right? Because I want all hands on deck, right? So I think prioritizing the vulnerability is the first most important thing whenever an API vulnerability or any vulnerability is discovered. And then, yes, like you mentioned, then it comes down to okay, if it's yeah, if I need to open a Jira ticket or not, and then like identifying the right owner, right stakeholders to have those conversations with, right? And then once those initial things are figured out, then uh, like implementing a fix or a patch for the identified vulnerability, making sure we are doing or performing regression tests and validating those fixes are correctly implemented, and then kind of ship out that and then obviously, right, and ship out the patch or the fix, and make sure uh, those things are not identified again. But there's an added step that I think I personally feel that my company or my organization is doing, which not a lot of companies out there do. We also do like a deeper analysis right after the fact, because once something is identified, then the entire focus is on uh, shipping out the patch, but nobody really takes time to evaluate how did we get to this point, like how did we get to a point where we missed something that led to this vulnerability being exposed. And so making sure it does not happen again, making sure we have proper controls plans, that we are shipping out secure product to begin with, that we don't have to fix things after the fact. So I think, yeah, in my opinion, and this is a current flow. This that we follow or I follow whenever an API vulnerability is identified.
Ashwini, this is very unique and pretty awesome. I think you should probably do some talk and share about this sort of unique practice that you have in your company, because I don't think I've seen it in probably any company doing deeper analysis post you have remediated, you have found the vulnerability. So good job there. And So we talked about how do you remediate once a vulnerability is found. Ashwini, can you tell me maybe like two key things that you tell your developers before they are building the API or during the build phase, when API has not been pushed into production?
Yeah, sure. And I think I briefly touched about it during our conversation, right? I previously mentioned, to me, uh, there are to me, authentication, authorization, those are the one of the key things that I
Yeah.
look for, or any like I look for, or like that's something that's really uh, uh, having like a secure authentication, or a secure authorization mechanism to make sure nobody is able to, or a bad person is not able to uh, call for resources that they are not authorized for. I think that's the most important thing. So this is something that I uh, tell or share with my engineers or developers, to look for those things, following the right guidelines, following the standards. And then it comes down to things like input validation, sanitization, right? Need to make sure that the endpoints or the APIs that are being built uh, are like, if they are taking if they're taking inputs from a user, they're properly being validated and sanitized, so that we are not introducing any vulnerabilities like SQL injection or cross-site scripting, those kind of things. So I think, yeah, these are my two main uh, suggestions or advice to engineers when it comes to securing APIs pre-prod.
Got it. Ashwini, that's right. Authentication and authorization, even in the new OS top 10 that we have, a lot of things have changed, but authentication and authorization have remained the same in the top 10 list. So those are two by default the most important vulnerabilities that are important for API security. Now. Ashwini, so we haven't talked about third-party APIs, right? And there's very little out there about them also, how to secure them. And you've touched upon it in the beginning when you were talking about inventory, how it's important to
Yeah.
have like a complete inventory, including the third party services, right? So let's say your development team is integrating some kind of a third party services, like SDK of Slack or Twilio, or some other Stripe, maybe third party service.
Yep.
What are your guidelines to securing those? I'm guessing it's going to be different from your APIs, your internal APIs.
Yes, yeah, I think you bring up a good point. It's not always securing your internal APIs or APIs that you've built, right? There are so many, like there are third-party APIs that you need to integrate with for whatever reasons, right? So, and yeah, I'm gonna be honest, it's not straightforward. Personally, I feel that is more tricky. It's trickier than securing our own APIs because that's something that I can control, right? So when it comes to third parties, I think the main struggle or the main uh, concern from my side is I know very little about that. I know very little about the practices that have been followed by the third party vendor when they are building or developing their APIs, right? So if I'm using something that I don't know how it's built and taking it, integrating it into my environment, then yeah, I'm concerned. So on that note, yeah, I think the first step for me is understanding uh, what's understanding why we are doing it why we are doing something, why we are doing it, and what we are really trying to achieve, right? Unless I know the business use case or unless I know the end goal of it, uh, be like I know uh, who's the customer of it. Is it something being going to be used internally? Do I need to make sure, like, are customers or members using it? What sort of data it might be touching? So I think those things, identifying those things is the first step for me. And then since it's like and since it's third party, again, like I mentioned before, it I know very little about those APIs. Then it's also about familiarizing yourself with the documentation provided by those vendors, right? Checking or looking at their data sharing policies, looking at what sort of internal security controls they have, uh, reviewing or ensuring we are not overexposing something. A lot of times these vendors, they try to nobody wants less, right? Everyone everyone is greedy. That's how we are. So a lot of times these vendors, uh, they try to take more access of our environment than they actually require. So making sure that we are validating what level of access we are giving to those API endpoints, and making sure like the data that might be shared, how it's encrypted, say in transit, how it's stored at rest, proper encryption is there, how the vendor is storing API keys, credentials. And also I think one of the thing is making sure the third party dependencies, they are up to date, right? So I think it's like you can see, right? There is a bunch of things that I'm trying to do in a very short amount of time versus what I would have done by following a well documented process if it's an internal API. So I think this makes it a bit more challenging than uh, 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 reviewing or securing an internal API versus third party API.
Got it. Ashwini, I think we've covered everything that we have to in securing how to secure basically your APIs pre-prod.
Yep.
And awesome job at those answers. I just have a final question, which is like a bonus question where which we kind of are going to publish everywhere, sort of. How are you going to how will you advise a security engineer who's probably early in their career and especially joining a fintech company and is thinking about securing APIs? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think yeah, there are many things I can give many advices, right? But I think my top suggestion would be, which is actually it's funnily it's like it's not really a security it's not really like a security specific advice, but I would say is learning the business, right? And this is something that I still follow. Like I've been in this industry for a long time, but this is something that I do first thing whenever I join a new company, a new organization, right? Especially fintech, because unless I learn about the business, unless I know what the company really does, who our customers are, how are we generating revenues, uh, I don't know what I'm securing, right? I don't know what products are out there, what are the key products or key, uh, in this case, I don't know, like in a fintech company, there might be many services that the company is providing to its customers or members, right? So until and unless I know what those services are, I don't think I can really think about securing those or securing those APIs related to those services in a more systematic and planned way. It's just going to be uh, uh, ad hoc, and it's really not going to be a good a foolproof approach. So I think for that reason, my advice or suggestion would be just just spend some time, take 2 weeks, learn the business, and then go about doing what you do best, which is securing the APIs.
Awesome. Ashwini, that's the key, right? Like getting your fundamentals right before you actually jump into solving something.
Yeah.
That's the key.